Hello, tonight. You find yourself by a quiet riverbank, the sky veiled in lavender twilight, and the sound of gently flowing water weaving around your ankles like curious whispers. There's a wolf nearby, not the growling, scary type, but a gentle, watchful creature curled protectively around two very famous infants, Romulus and Remus, tiny and pink-faced, suckle quietly in the safety of fur. You're invisible here, don't worry. The she-wolf glances your way briefly, gives a soft huff, and returns to her unexpected babysitting duties. Now, you may not survive this journey through ancient Rome emotionally, that is, the sandals, the egos, the betrayals, and that's before we even get to the flaming peacocks. So before you relax, consider liking and subscribing, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and local time in the comments. I'm curious who else can't sleep in your part of the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background noise. And let's slowly begin tonight's voyage. You stand on the damp moss of the Palatine Hill, watching the two brothers grow, one sharper, more serious, the other quicker to laugh. Romulus and Remus play near the mouth of a cave, shouting nonsense Latin at each other, building forts from sticks and rocks. You smell fresh earth, wet bark, and distant wood smoke. The cave looper, Calais, warm and shadowy, a womb of myth where even the gods hold their breath. As they grow, their story, your story, carries the marks of divine meddling. Born of Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin, and Mars, the god of war. They were meant to die, but refused to. Kind of like Rome itself. Some historians wonder whether the she-wolf was really just a metaphor, a term used for a local prostitute who raised them. But let's not ruin the moment with that image. The furs, warmer. You walk through time like a breeze, catching snatches of conflict as the brothers grow restless. They want more: land, power, a name. They agree to found a city, but argue over which hill to build it on. Classic sibling rivalry, but with dire consequences. Now you're standing on a rocky crest. Remus leaps mockingly over a newly built wall, arms out like wings, his voice teasing. Romulus doesn't smile. The tension is syrup thick. Then, in a blur of motion, he strikes. A rock, a blade, a brother's final breath. Remus falls silently, slowly, as if even gravity is in mourning. The wind hushes. Romulus stands alone, not victorious, just alone. And yet, a city is born. You walk its first streets, narrow and muddy, echoing with hammer blows and shouted orders. Romulus wears a deep blue tunic, frayed at the hem, his eyes unreadable. He recruits men, mostly outlaws and wanderers, offering them refuge in a land without roots. You catch the scent of sweat, iron, and fresh-cut pine. But there's a problem. No women. A city of men is hardly a city. So Romulus throws a party and invites the neighboring Sabines. Food, wine, some flute playing, and then, well, a mass bride napping. The rape of the Sabine women, as historians call it, is not a bedtime tale in the cheerful sense. But oddly, the women stay not because they must, but because over time they grow attached. Historians still debate whether this was Stockholm Syndrome, or just extremely persuasive Roman courting. You sit beneath a fig tree as the Sabine King Titus Tatius marches to take his daughters back. The battlefield trembles, but the women run between the two armies, pleading for peace. And somehow, miraculously, it works. Sabines and Romans merge. The new Rome is more than Romulus. Now, years pass. You watch Romulus grow older, prouder, heavier in both cloak and conscience. One stormy evening, he walks out to inspect the troops. Lightning flashes, thunder groans, and then nothing. He's gone, vanished, as if the sky simply claimed him. Some say he became the god Quirinus. Others think his own guards took him out. Either way, Romulus exits stage left in a haze of god myth and political mystery. You lie down on the grass where he disappeared, the stars watching silently overhead. Crickets chirp. Somewhere, a torch sputters out. Rome is real now, but its origin still feels stitched together by dream-stuffed blood and ambition. One small fact, often lost in the drama. Early Romans believed the gods, communicated through birds' augury. So Romulus' whole argument over which hill to build on, decided by who saw more birds. Yep, Rome founded on a celestial bird-watching contest. Now you drift away from the she-wolf's cave, from the ashes of Ramus, from Romulus' vanishing act. But the city he left behind is not done whispering. You blinkened its years later. The stone streets are wider now, worn smooth by sandaled feet, by trade, by ceremony. Rome stretches like a lion waking from a nap, lazy but undeniably powerful. You stroll past rows of brick buildings, past vegetable carts and tired mules, past neighbors arguing about fish prices in the forum. Rome isn't grand, yet not in marble. Not in glory, but she's breathing, growing, muttering. Your hand brushes the rough edge of a wooden doorframe. Inside, a family eats boiled lentils and bread, a child humming something that might be a hymn. They glance at you, then back at their food, unfazed by a silent time traveler watching from the corner. But this chapter isn't about households. It's about King 7, to be exact. After Romulus disappears, a man named Numa Pompilius takes the throne. He's nothing like the founder. Where Romulus was fire, Numa is water. Calm, pious, philosophical. You find him in a grove just outside the city, speaking softly to a nymph Egeria, his divine counselor, or so he claims. Scholars still debate whether Egeria was a literal nymph, an imaginary friend, or just a brilliant way for Numa to justify his decisions with divine PR. Thanks to Numa, Rome gets its religion. Temples rise, sacred rituals bloom. Even the famous Vestal virgins, priestesses, who must remain chaste or risk being buried. Alive fun times are formalized under his reign. One marginal fact, Numa allegedly banned human sacrifice, which, you have to admit, is a pretty progressive HR policy for the 700s BCE. Then come kings with names that feel like old bronze. Tullus, Hostilius, Ancus, Marcius. You wander with them into war and peace, and then back again. Tullus burns with aggression, reviving Rome's fighting spirit. You see him at dawn, sharpening his sword beside a tiny shrine. He's already planning to destroy Alba Longa, and he does. Tearing down the city, but absorbing its people, an old Roman trick. Destroy the shell, keep the soul. You pause near the remains of the Curia Hostilia, the early Senate house. Senators argue in hushed tones, not yet powerful, but already dramatic. A stray dog wanders past. Someone throws it a fig dot, then Ancus Marcius builds bridges, literal ones, like the pons Sublicius over the Tiber. He's Rome's infrastructure. King, you walk across that first bridge under grey clouds, marveling at how fragile it looks, how solid it feels. Rain patters against your shoulders. A vendor nearby sells dried herbs, to keep spirits away from new constructions. Superstition clings to the architecture, but it's under the fifth king, Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, that Rome starts dreaming big. He's Etruscan, foreign, ambitious. He introduces symbols of kingship, the scepter, the purple robe, the ivory throne. Rome gets its first sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima. You stand beside the great mouth of it, holding your nose and admiring its engineering. Practical, yes. Elegant, not even slightly. Later, in the palace garden, Priscus is murdered by the sons of his predecessor. Power doesn't change hands gently in Rome. His wife, Tanaquil, hides his death and installs their son-in-law, Tullius, as the next king. This woman could have run a Netflix miniseries on palace intrigue. Servius, raised as a servant, rules with surprising tact. He reforms the census, the army, the social order. For once, you see a king who cares where the poor sleep. But his reign ends poorly. Very poorly. You're in the hallway when it happens. Servius, thrown down the palace steps by Tarquinius Superbus. Tarquin the Proud. The old king gasps, tries to rise, but the guards look away. The new regime has begun. Tarquin is everything. His name suggests cruel, egotistical, bad for democracy and possibly for houseplants too. He builds big, the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill. You watch it rise stone by stone, massive and proud. It smells of wet limestone and ambition, but his cruelty leads to the final spark. The tragedy of Lucretia. You meet her briefly in the garden of her husband's villa, gentle, educated, kind. One night, Tarquin's son, Sextus, enters her chamber. What follows shatters the monarchy forever. Lucretia, dishonored, takes her own life. The dagger falls from her hands with a dull thud. Brutus sees that Brutus swears vengeance at her funeral, and thus the Roman kingdom ends. The Republic is born. You sit at the edge of the forum, watching senators gather under olive-grey skies. Their faces set like iron. There's no king now. No more purple robes. Just a new experiment in freedom, one that will last nearly 500 years, give or take a few coups. A final note: despite all 7 kings, the Romans were so against monarchy afterward that the word Rex King basically became a slur, calling someone king in the Republic. Politically suicidal. Like showing up to a vegan potluck with a rotisserie pig. You rise from your spot, the dust of centuries on your sandals. Ahead lies the Republic, glorious, brutal, brilliant, but you know what's coming. Because no matter how hard they try to avoid it, Rome will crown an emperor again. You stand beneath a bronze sky streaked with early sunlight, watching Rome rub the sleep from its eyes. It's the dawn of the Republic now, and the city feels ... different. Less regal, more chaotic. Like a teenager who's just moved out and insists they're totally fine on their own. Thank you very much. No more kings. Only elected magistrates called consuls. 2 at a time, just in case one gets any funny ideas. Checks and balances, Roman edition. You walk past the rostra, that raised platform where speakers now unleash opinions like thunder. Some are inspiring. Most are slightly drunk. A hush falls over the forum as Lucius Junius Brutus, the man who drove out the monarchy, steps forward in his heavy, wine-colored toga. You squint at his face. It's the look of a man carrying the weight of ideals on his shoulders. And also maybe a hangover, but ideals mostly. He declares the birth of the race, publica, the public thing, a government by the people. Well, the male landowning citizens. Baby steps. It's not all parchment and philosophy, though. Almost immediately, Rome is at war. Again, with nearly everyone. Etruscans, Sabines, Volsci, Aqui can barely keep track without a spreadsheet. You trek up muddy hills, through olive groves, and across hastily built camps. Soldiers in iron helmets eat dried figs and mutter about bad boots. Here's a historical fact to tuck under your pillow. The Roman Republic was designed more for survival than for beauty. Everything, its laws, its military, even its architecture, was practical, no nonsense. And occasionally very pointy. And here's a marginal detail. During early Republican wars, Rome often borrowed military tactics from its enemies. They were humble that way. If someone had a better way to stab, Rome would politely copy it and then conquer you with it. You pass a cluster of women weaving wool near the Temple of Vesta. One whispers about a law proposed by a consul, harsh grain penalties for hoarders. Another scoffs. As if men understand grain, she mutters. But back to Brutus, our stoic, reluctant founder. He doesn't get a happy ending. When his own sons plot to restore the monarchy, Brutus has them executed. Imagine sending your kids to boarding school and then to the scaffold. Scholars still debate whether this act was noble, tragic, or just a little too on brand for early Rome. After Brutus, you float through a generation of cautious growth and cautious celebration. Triumphs are smaller. Statues are modest. Victory is tempered with anxiety, because this new republic is like a clay pot, useful but fragile. Rome creates the 12 tables, the city's first attempt at written law. You stand beside them, etched onto bronze in the forum, gleaming under the sun. Citizens read them aloud, mumbling through clauses about debt, theft, and public behavior. One law bans you from burning a corpse inside the city, probably a rule that came with a rather smelly backstory. This was a big deal. Before the tables, law lived in the memories of priests and patricians. Now, even the average Roman could know what was legal, or at least pretend to. Speaking of average Romans, you start hearing the low grumble of discontent. The plebeians, Rome's working class, are fed up. They want land, rights, dignity. You hear a baker yell, "We fight your wars, clean your forums, and still can't marry your daughters." Drama, eventually. They march out of the city in protesta, massive walkout called the secession of the plebs. Imagine an entire labor union storming off to the nearest hilltop and refusing to return until they get better working conditions. That's essentially what they did. Rome panics. But the result? A brand new office, the tribune of the plebs. These officials had one veto. If something unjust was about to happen, they could shout veto and stop it. You imagine them like ancient Roman lifeguards with legal whistles. That moment shifts everything. The Republic becomes just a little more balanced. Not perfect, but less tilted. The tension, however, remains. Class struggles continue, boiling under the surface like a pot of lentils left too long on the hearth. Now, step with care toward the battlefields again. The Latin League revolts. Samnites fight dirty. Vigi resists for a full 10 years. Rome, ever persistent, absorbs defeat like its training fuel. One rainy morning, you watch a young general named Camillus lay siege to Veii. The battle is grueling. When it ends, he thanks the gods by dedicating 1/10 of the spoils to Apollo, because, even in victory, Romans hedge their bets with the divine. Scholars still debate whether Camillus was Rome's savior or just really good at PR. Marginal fact, Camillus used underground tunnels to surprise the enemy. Basically, ancient military Minecraft. Back in the city, the streets fill with chatter. A statue goes up. The victory parade is modest. No golden elephants yet. You end the chapter atop a nearby hill, the Palatine glowing faintly below in the twilight. Rome stretches wider now, stronger, more complex, but the Republic is still learning to walk, and you're already hearing whispers of a much darker storm ahead. You hear it before you see it, bells ringing, dogs barking, and somewhere in the distance, a woman shouting at someone to close the shutters. Then, suddenly, the world goes still. The Gauls are here. Rome, for all its ambition, is still vulnerable. It's 390 BCE, and an army of tall, pale warriors has marched from the north like a storm in sandals. They sack the Etruscan city of Clusium first, and when Rome gets nosy and sends ambassadors, big mistake. The Gauls redirect their rage southward. Congratulations, Rome, you've made the guest list. You stand beside the Elia River, watching young Roman soldiers fidget with their spears. It's their first real test, and they fail spectacularly. The Gauls, led by a chieftain named Brennus, tear through the Roman lines like a fork through soft cheese. You blink, and the Roman army is gone. Just ghosts and broken helmets in the mud. The survivors limp back to the city. You follow, feet aching, heart heavy. Soon the Gauls breach the walls. Rome burns. Livestock screams. Marble cracks. The Capitol Hill becomes the last Roman stronghold. And it's not going well. You crouch beside a soldier on the Capitol, his eyes darting, hands gripping a dull blade. One night, he wakes to the faintest whisper footsteps. The Gauls are climbing, the cliffs in secret, but then a cacophony of honks. Sacred geese, kept for ritual purposes, lose their minds and start screaming. This ridiculous detail, the geese saving Rome, actually happened. Or so they say, marginal fact. The goose temple was later rebuilt in their honor. Rome, where birds get architecture. Eventually the Romans buy their freedom literally. They pay the Gauls in gold, and when they protest the rigged weights, Brennus throws his sword on the scale and says, "Vi victis," woe to the vanquished. You know, just your typical customer service experience. The Gauls leave. Rome survives. Barely, but something changes in the city's soul after this. The humiliation leaves a deep scar. Rome starts to harden, militarize, rebuild not just stone, walls, but its identity. You stand in the middle of a dusty street and feel the quiet fury, the kind that doesn't scream, it prepares. This is the moment when Rome gets serious. You stroll past teams of workers reconstructing temples and homes. Ash still clings to the corners, but marble is rising again. Rome forms alliances, builds roads, strengthens legions. There's a hunger now, a need to never feel that small again. Soon the Samnites are back, and the Samnite wars begin. You walk up to a forest clearing near Cadine Forks, where Roman legions get trapped in a mountain pass. They surrender without a fight, forced to walk under a yoke of spears, an ancient humiliation ritual. You flinch, even though you're just watching. Scholars still debate whether this disaster pushed Rome to innovate, militarily or just emotionally scarred it for a generation. You do notice something new in the army though. Instead of rigid lines, they're experimenting with maniples, small, flexible units. It's like Rome finally realized it's okay to pivot sometimes. Like battlefield yoga, but with more stabbing, You return to the city and visit a triumphal arch going up to celebrate a smaller, more successful campaign. Children chase each other through columns, while a veteran tells an exaggerated war story to a skeptical butcher. The tale involves 3 boars, a lightning bolt, and suspiciously good hair. Meanwhile, social tension continues to simmer. The plebeians demand more rights again. This time, they want access to the consulship. And after years of resistance, they get it, slowly, grudgingly. One of the new magistrates, a plebeian named Gaius Licinius, proposes debt relief and land redistribution. The elite senators, predictably, clutch their pearls, metaphorically of course. But the laws pass, and the republic grows, slightly more inclusive. Slightly, you pause at the edge of a grain field outside the city. A farmer, recently returned from war, is explaining to his daughter how Rome works. We fight so the city can breathe. We farm so it can grow. One day, maybe they'll thank us. Spoiler, they probably won't. Now look, east. Rome's gaze is shifting toward Magna Graecia, the southern parts of Italy still rich with Greek colonies. Tarentum, in particular, doesn't like Rome's growing confidence. So they call in help. From across the sea, Pyrrhus, king of Epirus, tall, ambitious, owns war elephants. You can already smell the drama. You find yourself on a battlefield at Heraclea, ducking behind a fig tree. The Roman soldiers are frozen. Elephants charge like thunder in leather armor. The army breaks. Pyrrhus wins, but barely. Then comes the second battle. Same result. Pyrrhus again victorious, but he's bleeding men like a cracked wineskin. After the fight, you hear him mutter, "Another such victory, and I am undone." And just like that, you learn where the term Pyrrhic victory comes from. Actual history fact, brought to you by very tired soldiers. Eventually, Pyrrhus gives up. Too expensive, too far, too Roman. He leaves, muttering something about how weird Roman helmets look. Rome absorbs the south. Now all of Italy belongs to her. You sit beneath an olive tree. The hills quiet for now. The sun hangs low. Rome has weathered kings, class wars, humiliations, and elephants. She's tougher now, smarter, just a little more dangerous. And as you drift toward sleep, you start to feel it again, that soft humming in the stones, the whispers in the columns. Something big is coming. Carthage. It starts with trade routes and olive oil, like most arguments worth having. You're walking along the docks of a Roman port, maybe Ostia, maybe somewhere Sicilian. Crates of dates, amphorae of wine, and fish that frankly smell like they've already declared war. In the salty wind, merchants shout, coins clink, and nearby someone slips on an octopus. That's when you hear the name, Carthage, across the sea. On the glittering coast of North Africa, Carthage is a powerful city-state with purple sails, brilliant engineers, and more silver than sense. They're Phoenician by heritage, slick sailors, and they've been controlling trade like it's a board game they invented. Rome, still a Latin power, still relatively new to this whole empire business. You wander through the Senate as the First Punic War brews. Senators argue over whether Rome even should have a navy. One claims Romans weren't meant for the sea. Another coughs loudly and says, maybe it's time we try. You imagine that guy is from Naples. Historical fact. Rome had no fleet at the start of the First Punic War. They built one from scratch, using a captured Carthaginian ship as a model. That's like trying to win a Formula One race after disassembling your neighbor's car and saying, yeah, I think I got it. Your sandals crunch on dry sand as you observe the first Roman naval training. Farmers turned, sailors flip over in boats, tangle oars, and one guy brings a chicken because he misunderstood the term coastal raiding. You chuckle, but soon enough, somehow it works. Rome invents a boarding device called the corvus, basically a giant gangplank with a spike. When the Carthaginian ships get close, Roman soldiers drop it, run across, and turn sea battles into land battles. You grin, classic Rome. And here's a marginal fact for tonight. One of Rome's admirals, Gaius Duilius, was so proud of his naval victory that he made a statue of himself, with a built-in perfume dispenser, because nothing says war hero like smelling like lavender. You float now above the island of Sicily, watching from a gull's-eye view as the battles rage over decades. Siege after siege, Hamilcar Barca, name that will matter, leads the Carthaginians with grit. The Romans adapt, fumble, learn. Eventually, after 23 years of cis-smashing, Rome wins the First Punic War. Barely you're there when the peace is signed. Carthage loses Sicily. Rome gains its first overseas province. Nobody cheers too loudly. Everyone's exhausted. Even the gods seem to mutter, that was a lot. Time rolls forward. A few uneasy decades pass. You wander the streets of Rome again, noting new fountains, taller statues, and more smug senators. But Carthage, quietly rebuilding. One particular family is not taking the loss well. The barcas you cross the sea, sand curling round your ankles, and you're in Hispania, now modern Spain. Hamilcar Barca, still bitter, carves out a new power base. His son is nearby, a boy with fierce eyes and war braided into his soul. His name is Hannibal. One morning, you watch Hamilcar swear his son to eternal hatred of Rome, like a bedtime story, but with more doom. Then Hamilcar dies, and Hannibal inherits his father's mission like a curse. He grows up smart, strategic, charismatic, and frankly terrifying. You follow him through the forests and mountain passes of Iberia as he expands his control. Rome watches nervously, but doesn't act dash yet. Then, the spark. Hannibal attacks the Roman-allied city of Saguntum. Rome demands justice. Carthage shrugs. And so begins the Second Punic War. Cue dramatic drums. You now find yourself high in the Alps, wind biting your cheeks, hooves crunching on ice. Hannibal is doing the unthinkable, crossing the Alps with an army, including elephants. Elephants in snow. The air smells like sweat, fear, and possibly trampled pine. Historians still debate how many elephants survived the crossing, but everyone agrees the psychological impact on Rome was massive. One Roman child allegedly fainted just hearing about it. Okay, that might have been poetic license. Down into Italy Hannibal comes. The battles begin. Trebia, Trasimene. Then Cannae. Cannae. You float above it, horrified. Hannibal surrounds the Roman army in a perfect pincer movement, perhaps the most famous in military history. Some 50,000 Roman soldiers die in a single day. You can't look away. The dust is red. The river is red. The sky is somehow redder. Rome panics. Senators don black robes. The gods receive all the sacrifices. One man, Fabius Maximus, proposes a new strategy. Don't fight. Harass, stall, delay. He becomes known as the delayer, and for once, that's a compliment. Eventually, Rome recovers. Years pass. Hannibal remains in Italy, but lacks reinforcements. Meanwhile, Rome starts pushing into Hispania and Africa. The war shifts again. You now stand beside a young general named Publius Cornelius Scipio. Handsome, brilliant, slightly theatrical. He sails for Carthage and forces Hannibal to return home. At Zama, the final battle of the Second Punic War, Rome wins. Hannibal is defeated, not destroyed, just dimmed. Rome now controls Spain, Sicily, Sardinia, and more. Carthage is allowed to exist, but only as a whisper of its former self. Scholars still debate if Rome should have left them alone. You lean against a marble column, heart thudding. You've just witnessed one of the most epic rivalries in history. And it's not quite over. But for now, the sea is calm, the roads are Roman, and the Republic is feeling unstoppable. Maybe too unstoppable. You're not sure when the mood shifted, but somewhere between victory parades and tax reforms, Rome starts behaving differently. You wander through the Roman Forum, past marble columns that now cast longer shadows. Victories over Carthage have swelled the Republic's ego on its borders. You see senators wrapped in dyed wool togas, their fingers heavy with rings, debating grain prices while slaves fan them lazily. Power smells like olive oil and ambition. Back on the frontiers, expansion continues. Rome absorbs Macedonia, Greece, parts of Asia Minor, all while insisting it's only defending its interests. Sure, Rome. Historical fact. After the defeat of Carthage, Rome didn't pause. Instead, it aggressively pursued new wars across the Mediterranean. Some historians argue this wasn't expansionism, was preemptive security. Others call it imperialism with better PR. You overhear a senator mutter something about liberating the Greeks from themselves. As Rome sacks Corinth in 146 BCE, the city burns. Statues are looted. Gold is melted. One legionnaire pockets a bust of Socrates and calls it Steve. It doesn't feel very liberating. Meanwhile, back in Africa, Carthage rises like a stubborn weed. Against Roman orders, it starts building defenses. You follow the Roman envoy who delivers the message. Stop, or else. Carthage hesitates. Rome doesn't. Enter the Third Punic War, short but brutal siege. You stand on a hilltop and watch flames consume the city once feared across continents. For 17 days, Carthage burns. The ground quakes with collapsing temples. Eventually, it falls. And here's a marginal detail for tonight. Legend says the Romans salted the earth, so nothing would grow again. Modern scholars doubt this was likely symbolic or exaggerated. But hey, you sprinkle a little salt on your salad and call it divine justice, too. You shift now into a quieter room, the libraries of Pergamon. Rome takes not only territory, but ideas. Greek philosophers, Eastern astrologers, Egyptian cults, all filtered through Latin now. You listen as a Roman child recites Homer, but in a Romanized accent, mispronouncing Achilles as Aquilus. You don't correct him. It's bedtime. Still, something's brewing in Rome. The Senate, once a symbol of republican stability, starts wobbling. The more land Rome controls, the more wealth pours in, and the more unequal things get. You visit the countryside and see small farmers struggling, their land bought up by elites forming vast latifundia. Slaves work these estates, leaving little room for free citizens to earn a living. You follow one such displaced farmer as he moves to the city, hoping for opportunity. Instead, he finds crowded tenements, bread lines, and a general named Tiberius Gracchus standing on the rostra calling for land reform. Now, this is where things get spicy. Tiberius, a tribune of the plebs, proposes redistributing public land to the poor. The elites are not thrilled. Debates turn into brawls. In 133 BCE, during a vote, Tiberius is clubbed to death with a chair leg. Yes, a chair leg. Marginal fact, the Senate didn't allow weapons in meetings, so they got creative. His brother Gaius, Gracchus, picks up the torch. He's louder, faster, and more ambitious. He introduces grain subsidies and courts the equestrian class. But he too meets a grim fate, cornered on the Aventine Hill. Choosing death over capture, historians still debate whether the Gracchi were heroic reformers or dangerous populists. You simply note that their deaths marked the beginning of a new era. The Republic is now officially unstable. You turn your gaze to the army. Enter Gaius, Marisa general, who reforms the military by recruiting landless citizens and promising them land in return. Soldiers are no longer just citizens fighting for Rome. They're loyal to their generals. It's a huge shift, and you feel it in the campfires. Soldiers tell jokes, not about the Senate, but about our guy Marius. One even carves a little figurine of him out of olive wood and kisses it before bed. You don't judge, but here comes Lucius Cornelius Sulla, patrician, old school, and not a fan of Marius. Civil war breaks out between the two. You dodge fire in the streets, broken statues, shredded togas. Sulla marches on Rome twice. The second time, he declares himself dictator with no term limit. Bold historical fact. Sulla is the first Roman to seize power by force and then retire voluntarily. He literally says, "My work here is done," throws a party, and retires to his villa to write his memoirs and raise peacocks. Yes, peacocks. You sit beside one as it screeches. It sounds a little like democracy, gasping for air. Rome breathes, but heavily now. You glance toward the eastern sky. New figures are rising. Ambition takes on new names, and civil war is far from over. But for tonight, you drift through marble courtyards and burnt forums, through cities razed and rebuilt, through the stories of brothers who bled for fairness and generals who chased eternity. You'll need rest for what's coming next. The streets of Rome feel uneasy now, like a stage before the curtain rises on a tragedy you already know the ending to. You're walking past statues of long-dead heroes, their marble eyes staring into a future they wouldn't recognize. Civil wars, land reforms, dictators. Rome has had quite the mood swing. And tonight, you meet the man who will shove the Republic to the brink with a grin on his face. Gaius Julius Caesar. He's younger than you expect. Confident, calculating, charming. Think of the kind of guy who'd win a gladiator battle and then write a best-selling scroll about it. You find him early on in Gaul, where he's not just fighting tribes, but rewriting history in real time. Literally, he writes Commentary de Bello Gallico, and the third-person narration makes it sound like he's narrating his own movie trailer. Historical fact: Caesar's conquest of Gaul expanded Roman territory massively and made him wildly popular back home. His book was both military propaganda and humble brag. Scholars still debate whether he exaggerated enemy numbers, 10,000 Gauls. Really, he sends updates to Rome like postcards. Conquered again today. All is well. Miss you. Meanwhile, the Senate back home is sweating. Caesar's ambition is louder than a legion's march. One chilly morning, you walk with him as he approaches a narrow river. The Rubicon. Crossing it with an army is illegal, but Caesar looks at it like it's a puddle. He turns to his men, tosses a casual alia iacta est. The die is cast and crosses. You step lightly after him, aware that you've just walked into civil war. Back in Rome, panic erupts. Pompey, Caesar's old ally and now rival, flees the city with his supporters. You watch senators dash out of the forum like startled pigeons. The Republic is in cardiac arrest. The war isn't short. You follow Caesar across the Mediterranean through battles in Greece, Egypt, and even Asia Minor. He defeats Pompey's forces at Pharsalus. Pompey flees to Egypt, hoping for refuge. Instead, he gets stabbed on the beach by a politically ambitious Egyptian. Caesar arrives shortly after and is handed Pompey's head in a jar. Not exactly a welcome gift. Marginal detail, it's said. Caesar wept upon seeing Pompey's severed head. Was it grief, theatre, or strategy? You're not sure, but you pretend to cry with him, just in case. While in Egypt, Caesar meets Cleopatra and things get well warm. She rolls out of a rug like a Broadway entrance and impresses him with her intellect and presence. You raise an eyebrow. Caesar raises a son. Caesarion. You step into Alexandria's palace garden, the air thick with jasmine and political tension. Historians still debate the nature of Caesar and Cleopatra's alliance. Was it love, power, play, tourism? Whatever it was, it shook the Roman elite. Caesar returns to Rome in triumph, not just as a general, but as something more, dictator for life. He reforms the calendar, July, restructures debt, and begins urban renewal. Rome is cleaner, richer, more efficient and more terrified. The Senate murmurs in shadows. The phrase too powerful echoes like thunder behind marble walls. You lean in and hear words like tyrant and king. Rome has a deep allergy to monarchy. Crowns don't fit well on Republican heads. Enter Brutus and Cassius, friends, senators, conspirators. On the Ides of March, March 15, few follow Caesar into the theatre of Pompey. He smiles, unaware. A group surrounds him, daggers flash. The last thing he sees is Brutus. You wince, et tu, brute, becomes the ultimate betrayal phrase for the next 2 millennia. Marginal fact, Caesar wasn't stabbed just once. He was stabbed 23 times. Scholars still debate how many were fatal. Most agree he was already dead before he hit the floor. Rome freezes. The conspirators think they've saved the Republic. Instead, they unleash chaos. The people mourn Caesar. Mark Antony gives a funeral speech, so moving it becomes legendary. You listen from the crowd, and by the time he says friends, Romans, countrymen, you're already clapping. Antony reads Caesar's will aloud. Turns out, Caesar left money to every citizen. Cue the riots. You quietly back away. Now another. Civil war simmers. On one side, Mark Antony and Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. On the other, the assassins. And, spoiler alert, the assassins lose. You watch Brutus die at Philippi, surrounded by shadows. The Republic dies with him. Not with a bang but with a whisper and a few awkward sword stumbles. Octavian and Antony now share the spoils. You follow Octavian, the more patient of the two. He bides his time while Antony entangles himself with Cleopatra in Egypt. Their love story feels like a rerun, but this one has a tragic ending. At Actium, naval forces clash. You're aboard a Roman galley, watching flames lick the rigging, while Octavian's fleet corners Antony and Cleopatra's. They flee. Later, both take their own lives. Marginal fact, Cleopatra reportedly tested various poisons on prisoners to find the most painless death. The snake. may be symbolic, maybe not. Octavian returns to Rome, alone, victorious. The Senate, exhausted and desperate, names him Augustus. He accepts modestly. Of course, like someone being forced to take a cake they secretly ordered themselves. The Republic is over. The Empire begins. But you, dear listener, you've been through a lot. So as you drift through this transition of power, from Caesar's shadow to Augustus's golden dawn, you wonder, was it all inevitable? Scholars still debate that. You, meanwhile, need rest. You wake just before sunrise on a newly polished marble. Rome has changed again, but this time it wears its ambition like a crown of laurel and gold. Augustus, the man formerly known as Octavian, has remade the world, or at least once. You to believe he has. Rome is no longer a chaotic blend of ego and idealism. It's now an empire with a bedtime routine, roads swept, aqueducts humming, and temples glowing in soft pre-dawn light. The Pax Romana, Rome's peace, has begun, and you're right there, lingering in its quiet opening act, like a cat watching the empire stretch. Historical fact: Augustus ruled for over 40 years, longer than any Roman before him. He secured borders, reformed the army, and funded massive building projects. "I found Rome a city of brick," he famously said, and left it a city of marble. Scholars still debate if that was metaphor or humble brag. Tonight, you're a shadow among the colonnades of the Forum, watching statues rise in his honor before the man himself is fully cold. Augustus may have avoided calling himself a king, but let's be honest, the man invented imperial branding. No more public knife fights in the Senate, no more civil wars, just propaganda, urban development, and an occasional exile for poets who got too spicy. You follow Augustus as he rebuilds public faith in Rome's mythical past. Temples to Mars, the Avenger, and Apollo shimmer in moonlight. He even rewrites Roman morality, launching laws to encourage marriage and childbirth. You're pretty sure half the population got married out of legal panic. Then you catch a glimpse of Livia, his wife, quiet, intelligent, calculated. Historians still debate how much influence she really had. Some whisper she poisoned half the imperial family to get her son on the throne. You sip your imaginary wine and decide not to ask her directly. Marginal detail: Augustus was superstitious and consulted astrologers frequently. His birth sign, Capricorn, was stamped on coins, monuments, and banners like a cosmic logo. As the empire prospers, so does art. You sneak into the homes of poets like Virgil, who's busy finishing the Aeneidrome's mythic origin story wrapped in elegant Latin. You peek over his shoulder as he writes, "Arma vir." I sing of arms and the man, and you wonder if he knows he's about to be quoted for the next 2,000 years. Ovid, on the other hand, is less careful. You attend one of his late-night poetry readings, full of love spells and flirtation. Advice: he winks at a senator's wife. Augustus doesn't. Next thing you know, Ovid is shipped off to the Black Sea for a poem and a mistake. Scholars still debate what the mistake was. You suspect it involved togas, wine, and poor timing. You drift through Rome's golden age, watching bathhouses steam and amphitheaters echo with laughter and applause. Life, for many, has never been better. But there's always a shadow behind. The marble slaves doing the labor, provinces taxed into silence, and a Senate that now exists mostly for decoration. Augustus grows older. He becomes cautious, colder, more emperor than man. He prepares his succession like a chess game, moving potential heirs in and out of favor with a weary hand. He outlives most of them. In the end, it's Tiberius, his reluctant stepson, who takes the throne. When Augustus dies, Rome mourns with a controlled sob like a child who doesn't know if dad will return as a god. Spoiler, he does. The Senate deifies him faster than you can say Divus Augustus. Marginal fact, Augustus's final words were reportedly, "Did I play my part well?" Yes, he even turned dying into theater. And now, as the empire continues to expand, so do your steps. You walk dusty roads that lead to Egypt, Hispania, Germanial, pulsing with Roman law, language, and architecture, but not always with Roman love. The Pax Romana doesn't mean peace for everyone. In Judea, whispers of unrest grow louder. You pass through cities where Roman coins are accepted but Roman gods are not. A new generation, born under empire but longing for freedom, begins to ask dangerous questions. But that's a story for another night. Tonight, you linger in the candlelit shadow of Augustus's mausoleum. He promised eternity and, in many ways, he got it. You lie back on cool stone, staring at the stars reflected in the Tiber, wondering what kind of peace requires so much power to maintain. Scholars still debate whether Augustus saved the Republic, or quietly euthanized it. You're just glad your sandals aren't muddy. You cross the Rubicon once again, but this time, the river is a distant memory beneath the thunder of legions pressing outward, claiming the edge of the known world for Rome's eternal glory. You find yourself in the bustling streets of Londinium, a muddy settlement at the fringes of the empire, where Roman order clashes with wild Britannia's stubborn heart. The city's wooden walls creak under the weight of ambition and damp fog, while Roman soldiers march past tribesmen who still worship ancient gods in hidden groves. You smell the mixture of wood smoke, wet earth, and distant salt from the Thames as merchants barter fine cloth and salted fish. This is the edge, the place where civilization confronts the UNTAME. Historical fact, the Romans conquered Britain in 43 AD under Emperor Claudius, building roads, baths, and forts. Londinium soon became a vital trading hub. Scholars still debate the extent of Roman influence over native tribes. As many resisted for decades, you watch a legionnaire carefully, polishing his gladius while a local druid chants nearby, invoking mistletoe and oak. The two worlds coexist, uneasily, one fueled by discipline and empire, the other by mystery and nature's rhythms. Amid the foggy streets, you glimpse a small theatre where Latin plays entertain officers and local elites, but outside, whispers of rebellion stir, led by Queen Boudica, whose fiery spirit will soon challenge Rome's iron grip. You also meet a Roman engineer, obsessed with building straight roads and aqueducts, who boasts that Roman infrastructure will tame even these wild lands. It's an odd sort of faith, bricks and mortar as weapons of empire. Marginal fact, Roman baths in Londinium were heated by hypercost systems that circulated warm air beneath the floors, a technological marvel for their time, causing locals to gasp and murmur about Roman magic. You step inside one such bathhouse, feeling the warm steam rise as you sink into a hot pool, watching soldiers and civilians alike share laughter and whispered worries about the distant empire's fate. The clash of cultures goes beyond battlefields. It shapes everyday life. You see Roman fashion mixing with Celtic symbols and hear Latin words mingling with native tongues. You catch a child wearing a miniature helmet, pretending to lead legions against invisible enemies. Yet, not all is harmony. Rebels lurk in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to ignite flames of freedom. Queen Boudicca's revolt will shake Rome, and historians still debate whether her uprising was a noble resistance or a tragic war against inevitable change. As night falls, you wander through Londinium's wooden streets, lit by flickering torches and oil lamps, sensing the fragile balance between conquest and culture. The river reflects the stars, but also the silent hopes and fears of those caught between worlds. You pause by a riverbank, feeling the chill of British mist wrap around you, and wonder if the Empire's shadow will ever truly embrace this wild land, or if it will forever remain an outsider. Marginal detail: Roman coins, minted in Britain, sometimes featured local motifs, blending imperial authority with native identity, a small gesture with big meaning. You smile, imagining the stories these coins will tell centuries from now, tucked away in pockets or buried beneath forgotten soil. The sun rises slowly, promising a new day in Britannia. Roman roads stretching forward, carrying dreams and destinies alike. You tighten your cloak against the morning chill and step into the unfolding story, a silent witness to history's restless march. You move deeper into the heart of the empire, to the bustling forums and marble columns of Rome itself, where power is both intoxicating and fragile, held in the hands of emperors and senators who weave intrigue like delicate tapestries. The city hums with life, the chatter of merchants, the clatter of chariots, and the distant echo of orators stirring crowds. You feel the heat of the midday sun bouncing off white marble, and catch the scent of baked bread mixed with exotic spices. From far-flung provinces, the air is thick with ambition, whispers of conspiracy, and the ever-present tension between tradition and change. Historical fact: the Roman Senate wielded considerable influence during the Republic, but gradually lost power as emperors like Augustus centralized authority. Still, political maneuvering remained a deadly game. Scholars continue to debate how much real power senators retained under imperial rule. You watch as a toga-clad senator debates fiercely in the forum, his voice rising above the crowd, while nearby slaves carry messages and goods, their faces marked by exhaustion yet flickering hope. A procession parades by, celebrating a recent military victory, complete with banners, captured spoils, and the proud gaze of legionaries marching in perfect step. You notice the contrasting expressions, some triumphant, others weary from endless campaigns. Amid this spectacle, you spy a street philosopher quietly discussing stoic ideas about fate and virtue with a small group of eager listeners that will echo through centuries to come. Marginal fact: public baths were social hubs in Rome, places where citizens from all classes mingled, debated politics, or simply relaxed in warm waters heated by ingenious hypocaust systems. These baths were more than hygiene, they were cultural centers. You slip into one such bathhouse, the warmth seeping into your tired muscles as you watch conversations drift like steam, sometimes gentle, sometimes sharp with rivalry. Nearby, a poet recites verses praising Rome's eternal spirit, but you catch a glimpse of a street artist painting satirical images of the powerful, a subtle rebellion in brushstrokes and charcoal. You reflect on the city's paradox: immense wealth and crushing poverty coexisting side by side, temples towering above cramped insulae, where ordinary Romans live their daily struggles. Historians debate whether Rome's grandeur masked deep social inequalities that contributed to its eventual fall, or if its civic spirit was strong enough to endure centuries. As dusk falls, you walk toward the Colosseum, where gladiators prepare for combat, their armor clinking softly in the fading light. The crowd's murmur rises in anticipation. But you know this spectacle is more than mere entertainment, it's a ritual binding. Empire and citizen. You pause to hear the laughter of children playing near a fountain, their innocent joy a fragile thread in Rome's complex tapestry. Marginal detail. Emperor Nero famously competed as an actor and charioteer, blending scandal with power. Yet his reign remains one of the most controversial among historians. You leave the city's heart behind, stepping into narrow alleys lit by flickering torches, feeling the pulse of a civilization both majestic and human. The night air carries distant music and whispered secrets, and you prepare for the next step in your journey toward the provinces, where Rome's influence is tested by local traditions and emerging faiths. You find yourself journeying toward the farthest reaches of the empire, where Roman roads stretch endlessly through rugged hills and dense forests, connecting outposts where cultures clash and blend beneath the imperial eagle's shadow. The air smells of pine and earth, with an occasional sharpness of smoke from small village fires. Here, you witness soldiers patrolling wooden forts, their armor dulled by weather but their eyes sharp, guarding borders against restless tribes. Local villagers clad in homespun fabrics barter with Roman merchants, exchanging goods and stories alike, their faces etched with the wear of frontier life. Historical fact: the Roman Empire's borders, known as limes, were fortified with walls, forts, and watchtowers, creating a complex defense network that evolved over centuries. Yet, these borders were often more porous than impenetrable. Scholars debate how effective these defenses truly were in halting invasions. In a shadowed glade, you see a small group gathered around a fire, soldiers and locals sharing bread and tales, their accents blending, their laughter momentarily bridging the divide between conquerors and conquered. You observe the construction of a new watchtower, wooden beams rising under the watchful eyes of engineers, skilled in Roman techniques, adapted to local materials. Nearby, a scribe meticulously copies scrolls by flickering candlelight, preserving knowledge for distant Rome. Marginal fact: some frontier soldiers were recruited from local populations and even allowed to settle nearby after service, leading to unique cultural fusions that shaped regional identities. As twilight descends, you glimpse a solitary figure, druid-like seer, wrapped in a deep green cloak, quietly watching the horizon, embodying ancient traditions that quietly resist the empire's advance. The scent of wild herbs and distant animal calls fill the cool night as you rest beside a campfire, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on weathered faces. Historians debate whether the Romanization of these borderlands was a forceful imposition or a more fluid, reciprocal process shaped by negotiation and adaptation. You feel the weight of these remote lands, both a frontier of empire and a meeting point of worlds where stories are etched in stone and whispered on the wind. Your journey now turns toward the rise of new beliefs spreading quietly within the empire, hinting at profound transformations ahead. You walk into the heart of a bustling Roman city, where the whispers of old gods mingle with the quiet murmurs of new faiths, stirring beneath marble arches and crowded forums. The scent of incense drifts from small shrines nestled between grand temples dedicated to Jupiter, Mars, and Venus, while subtle symbols, fish, anchors, and lambs are etched discreetly on walls and doorways. signaling a faith that moves in shadows. Citizens clad in togas and tunics pass by, some pausing to exchange guarded glances, others carrying scrolls bearing sermons or sacred texts. You overhear fragmented conversations about resurrection, salvation, and eternal life, ideas that both intrigue and unsettle traditional Roman minds. The city hums with tension and hope. Historical fact: Christianity began as a small, often persecuted sect within the Roman Empire, gradually spreading through urban centers before eventually gaining imperial support. By the 4th century, it transformed the religious landscape profoundly. Scholars still debate the exact reasons and pace of its rise. In a narrow alley, a group of converts meets in secret, their faces illuminated by flickering oil lamps as they recite prayers in low tones, sharing stories of miracles and martyrdom. Nearby, a Roman official reviews reports about suppressing these gatherings, balancing political order with religious fervor. Marginal fact: early Christians often used everyday objects like the anchor or the peacock as secret symbols to communicate their faith covertly, avoiding Roman detection. You witness a pagan priest performing rituals at dawn, invoking ancient gods to protect the city from unseen dangers, while in a hidden corner, a Christian deacon offers comfort to the sick and poor, embodying a new kind of charity. The contrast between old and new permeates the era spiritual crossroads, where tradition and innovation wrestle quietly. Historians debate whether Christianity's spread was driven more by grassroots social movements or top-down imperial influence, but the undeniable change it brought reshaped the empire's soul. As dusk falls, you feel the delicate tension of a world on the cusp of transformation, where faith will become both a unifying force and a cause of conflict. The city's shadows deepen, and you prepare to follow the threads of power woven through Rome's political labyrinth. You step into the imposing marble halls of the Roman Senate, where power moves in whispers and every glance carries weight. Senators in rich, dark togas debate fiercely, their voices low but charged, discussing the empire's future amid growing internal strains. The air is thick with incense and tension, the walls adorned with busts of ancestors, watching over political games as old as Rome itself. You catch fragments of conversations about succession crises, civil unrest, and the mounting pressures from distant provinces demanding autonomy or revolt. The empire's vast borders strain under constant threats, barbarian tribes pressing in from the north and east, while economic woes ripple through crowded cities. The senators' speeches often cloak deeper fears of fragmentation and decline. Historical fact: the later Roman Empire faced repeated succession crises and internal power struggles that weakened its cohesion, making it vulnerable to external pressures. Scholars still debate the degree to which internal decay versus external invasions caused the empire's eventual fall in a shadowed corner. A senator secretly meets with advisors, plotting alliances and betrayals. A chess game of power that could alter Rome's destiny. Scrolls and maps are spread before them, plans to secure loyalty and crush dissent quietly. Marginal fact: some Roman senators were rumored to practice secret rituals or consult oracles, blending politics with superstition to gain an edge in power. Struggles outside the Senate: common citizens gather in marketplaces, unaware or indifferent to the machinations above, focused instead on daily survival, gossip, and the hope that peace might yet return. You observe a young soldier returning from the frontier, weary and battle-scarred, carrying news that fuels urgent debates within these marble walls. the empire's fate teeters between resilience and ruin. Historians argue whether the fall of Rome was inevitable due to systemic flaws, or whether different leadership could have reversed its decline. But the Senate's dramas remain a pivotal stage in the empire's final act. As night deepens, you feel the weight of history pressing down, and you prepare to witness the twilight years, the transformation from empire to legend. You find yourself wandering through the twilight streets of Constantinople, the new imperial capital shimmering with mosaics and golden domes reflecting the fading sun. The city breathes a mixture of ancient Roman pride and Eastern mystique, where cultures collide beneath the watchful eyes of monumental walls. Here, the spirit of Rome endures but shifts. Christianity now pulses through the heart of empire, reshaping its identity and rituals. You pass bustling markets filled with exotic spices, silk, and travelers from distant lands. An empire reinvented. On a new continent, yet haunted by memories of the West's crumbling power. Monks chant softly in cloisters while soldiers patrol the fortified walls, alert to threats beyond the horizon. Historical fact. After the fall of Rome in the West, the Eastern Roman Empire, known as Byzantium, continued for nearly 1,000 years, preserving Roman law and culture through turbulent centuries. Scholars still debate how much Byzantium was truly Roman or a distinct new civilization. You overhear a conversation about the Emperor Justinian's ambitious projects, grand churches rising, laws codified, and military campaigns to reclaim lost lands, reflecting both hope and desperation to restore imperial glory. Marginal fact: Byzantine silk production was so secretive that revealing its source was punishable by death, underscoring the empire's reliance on commerce and espionage. In A Quiet Courtyard, a philosopher discusses theology with a soldier, illustrating the fusion of faith and power that defines this era. Their words echo the eternal tension between earthly rule and divine will. You notice the blend of Roman architecture with Eastern influences, the arches, columns, and intricate mosaics telling stories of resilience and transformation. The city's mood is both vibrant and somber, a crossroads of past grandeur and uncertain futures, where every stone seems to whisper tales of glory and sacrifice. Historians argue whether Byzantium was a continuation of Rome's legacy or a distinct empire shaped by different forces. But its story undeniably extends the whisper of gods into a new age. As dusk settles, you sense the fading echoes of an empire that shaped the world, inviting you to rest before the final chapter unfolds. The shadows lengthen as you step beyond Constantinople, drifting into the quiet aftermath of an empire's long twilight, where ruins rest beneath wild grasses and forgotten roads curl into the earth like whispered secrets. You feel the weight of time settling softly around you as the mighty Roman world fades gently into memory, its echoes etched into the soil and stone. Here, in the silent countryside, you encounter the lives once lived, the farmers tending fields under the vast, starry sky, the monks preserving texts by candlelight, and travelers who still speak of Rome's past glories in hushed tones. The seasons turn slowly, carrying stories across generations like a gentle breeze, reminding you that even great empires bow to time's steady hand. Historical fact: the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD marked a significant turning point, yet Roman law, language, and culture deeply influenced the medieval world that followed. Scholars continue to debate the true fall, suggesting instead a complex transformation stretching over centuries. You notice small villages where ancient roads still link people, and mosaics fragment beneath creeping ivy, symbols of endurance and decay intertwined. Marginal fact: some Roman roads remained in use for over a millennium, silently guiding the footsteps of kings, pilgrims, and wanderers alike. As you walk, you hear the faint murmur of legends: Romulus and Remus, Jupiters, thunder, and the gods who once ruled skies and hearts fading, but never fully gone. The gods whisper in the rustling leaves and flowing streams, inviting you to listen with quiet reverence. You breathe deeply, feeling the cool night air settle into your bones, the rhythm of history slowing to a gentle pulse. The ancient world has slipped into dreams, its stories folding softly into the night, carrying you gently toward sleep. The journey through Rome's vast empire comes to rest here, in the hush between past and future, where all tales find their peaceful close.